morning. Welcome to today's devotional. We're in Hebrews chapter 11 and I want to speak about Abraham again. So let's look at Hebrews 11 verse 17 to 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called," concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. And we've already spoken about Abraham's obedience to God when he was called to leave everything that he knew, all that he'd learnt, all that he'd acquired over 75 years of life. He was called to leave it all behind and go on a journey of faith and obedience. And for that reason, amongst many others, he is the father of the faith. And here we're told about another incident within his life, a very important incident. It says, when he was tested, he offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. And you can read all about this in Genesis chapter 22. It's quite a bizarre episode, really. We think about the promises of God, how they were embodied really within that one man, Isaac. He was the son of promise, the son that had been promised to Abraham and Sarah. He was unique. There was another son at that time by the name of Ishmael, but God had made it very clear that it wasn't through Ishmael that his promise would come or that his covenant would be established. It was through Isaac. And so in many ways, the future, not just of Abraham's lineage, but also the future of the promise of God, the covenant history of God, was bound up in that one individual, Isaac. And suddenly, Abraham's tested as God asks him to offer up Isaac. Well, I wonder what that journey was like as he travelled to Mount Moriah with his son Isaac, all the things that were going through his mind. I just want to say and stress really right at the start that we know that God does not accept human sacrifice. This was a test. And as you read the story, you'll see that as it came to the crunch, as Abraham lifted his knife to kill his son Isaac on the altar on Mount Moriah, the angel of the Lord stopped him and provided a ram who was caught in a thicket by his horns. And it was there, as Abraham attested, that the Lord provided. And there's so much we could say about that particular incident, but I just want us to think about the radical faith and obedience. It says in verse 19, concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. So although he didn't know that God would not require his son of him, he was just being obedient. And in his mind, in order for the promises to continue, if he was required to give up his son, to slaughter his son on the altar, then that would require God to resurrect him. But the key here is that Abraham believed him. Abraham believed that he would be faithful to his promises. Abraham believed that if necessary, Isaac would be resurrected, and therefore he believed that God had the power to resurrect him. Friends, that's radical faith and radical obedience. And I think that it sits in this particular chapter as an example to us. It reminds us of the God that we serve, that he's a powerful God, that all things are possible for him. It reminds us of our own need to obey when we hear his voice. And maybe we won't understand all the ins and outs, but we are to trust and obey. Every step, a step of faith and obedience. So let me encourage you today, as we've just looked at these three verses, go back and read the original story in Genesis chapter 22. Think about the implications of that. Think about what it meant for Abraham. And also how it points forward to God providing a substitutionary sacrifice for our sins, for us. I'll leave that with you. May God bless you. Have a wonderful day.